So, welcome, Jeanette. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:30. Recognize Steve Lembke as our public, Jeanette White, state legislator, and Ian Keel, BCTV. And waive discussion of the rules of procedure, and immediately, once you have had a second to catch your breath, invite you to launch into your allotted minutes before you need to go off to your next meeting to discuss the S27 mandatory police force, which I believe you are introducing to the legislature this year.
Right, so let me give you a little bit of background.
Oh, good.
So I've been on the Government Operations Committee for 14 years. I haven't chaired it that long, but I've been on there for the entire time I've been in the Senate. And one of the areas that we cover is law enforcement. So that's how come we're looking at this. And in those years, I've seen at least 7 or 8 studies done on law enforcement in the state and what it means and how we provide it and how we pay for it. And we have this study done. Some of them we actually paid good money to have done. And then we put them on the shelf because nobody wants to take on law enforcement. And it isn't taking it on, it's that no matter what you do, you're going to make somebody mad. You're going to make the state police mad, municipal departments, the game wardens, the towns, the select boards. You're going to make somebody mad. And so, stupid me, last year, and the first study we found was from 1974. So this has been looked at for a long time. And so last year I talked to the rest of the committee and I said, are you willing to take a look at this and see what we might need to change? And they said, yep. So here we are. It would have been much easier to just leave it alone and maybe had one more study done, or maybe not, and just let it be the way it is. But we were hearing from a lot of people that the way it is now isn't the way it should be. And so interrupt me anytime you want to ask questions, because I can just, for those of you who know me, I can just keep talking forever.
Oh, but I have a question
Sure.
then. Did any of those studies have some substantive result that you folded into the legislation?
The legislation itself is, and I don't want to focus entirely on it because it's been there for 3 years. That bill was there all of last year, and the exact same bill, except that it had a different number, was there the entire last biennium.
But not voted on.
No, we didn't, because we wanted to look at it in a larger context of law enforcement instead of just that one issue. So yeah, some of the studies did say that the way we provide it and the way we pay for it isn't equitable. So that is part of the reason why this piece of legislation was introduced.
It isn't equitable across, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
across the state or among different municipalities or
Well,
all sorts of levels?
okay, so think of it this way. If you live in Brattleboro, you pay for the state police because that's part of your state tax. So you pay for the state police, then you pay for your police department, and then Putney contracts with the sheriff. Is that me? I think it might be, but I'm going to ignore it. So we contract with the sheriff for some amount of coverage, but not total coverage.
Right.
So the person and then there are towns that don't contract with anybody, who just depend on the state police. So the person in Brattleboro is subsidizing Putney, and they're subsidizing the town that doesn't provide any coverage because they're depending on the state police to come and cover for them. So that isn't really equitable. and not that they should all have the same level of service, but when people call, they expect somebody to come. And we heard from, so our committee set up a series of meetings this fall, and we've so far been to Bellows Falls, White River Junction, Brandon, Manchester, Newport, St. Johnsbury, and tomorrow we're going to Waterbury and St. Albans to hear what people have to say. And nobody could come to that, so so I just said I'd come out here and talk to you about it.
Yeah, great.
But so it is, some of the questions that we're asking are, I don't know if you probably saw there was a press release that I did that, okay, that's the wrong folder. I have too many folders. That talked about what some of the questions are, the equitable nature of what we do.
We looked and we didn't see the press release either, did
No,
we?
we couldn't
So
find it.
not the press release, and the bill is only the cover sheet. That's the only thing that's on the state legislature page. So we don't know what the bill entails. So all we know is mandatory police force.
Well,
And we've been
S27 is on there.
That's what I gave.
Yeah, but
put in
it
the
doesn't
folder.
say anything.
Well, it doesn't say anything. It just
Yeah.
says
Right. It looks like a
that
I've got it in front of me.
It's just
Right.
one page.
right.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
And there's
So
no
can I ask,
definitions within
so is not necessarily the bill that is going to be
No.
voted on?
That we may use S27 as a vehicle for whatever we're going to do, but we're looking at lots of stuff. We're looking at the academy and the type of training that we do. Do we really need 20 weeks of residential training in order to have people certified as law enforcement officers? We've been looking at the decertification process, the certification process. We're looking at recruitment and training and retention. So it is a much broader question that we're looking at. This clearly is one of the issues. And what happened is that, well, I am sorry you didn't see it, because I had, I put a piece in the Reformer and in the Commons and asked.
I looked at the Vermont Digger, but I didn't. I'm sorry, I forgot to.
I don't know.
No, they don't have anything on you in a long time.
Okay. And then we asked all police chiefs and sheriffs and all the associations and the VLCT and everybody to please send the press release to people. What VLCT did, I believe, is send out a thing saying we were dealing with S27. So that became kind of the focus. So we have had select board people at every one of our meetings. We've had.
The only thing I received from VLCT was a notification of your various meetings
Right.
around the state.
Yeah.
And it was going to be focused on S27.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Right, which it was not focused on S27. But that's, I didn't write it.
So
I
what does it
didn't
mean
write
to
that,
a town like Guilford? I mean, is this bill going to propose that Guilford's got to come up with a full-time police solution?
No.
Because part of the issue, particularly when you throw a Brattleboro in the same equation as Guilford, and then you take the state police as the other arm, that, Brattleboro has its own police, but there are certain times the state police answer calls. And then, if something happens in Guilford, the only option really, because we do contract with the state police, we don't contract with the sheriff's department, is to go there first. But the amount of calls that would come in Guilford are very different than the number of calls that would come into a larger population, whether it's Burlington, Brattleboro, Rutland, et cetera, et cetera. So when you looked at this fairness issue or this sharing issue of the cost side, how do you take that and try
We
to
don't
come up
know.
with a solution?
That's why we're having these hearings all
I see.
around the state, is to try. We don't have any of the answers, but one of the questions we asked, I think it was at the last meeting we had, was, do we have statistics on the number of calls that come from say Guilford and
Yeah.
Brattleboro, related to population.
Right.
Is the per capita call rate about the same? And what we heard from most of the law enforcement was that it is about the same. You have far many more calls in Brattleboro because you have far more many people,
Right.
but the ratio is about
similar.
is
Interesting.
is
You
very
mean
similar.
The population to the number of calls,
Yeah, yeah.
relatively speaking.
Yeah, that they're, and so what kind of, and we don't know what we mean by primary coverage.
Right.
In fact, we had been using the term primary coverage, but some of the police officers suggested we use general patrol, because that more clearly defines for them what they mean. How do you, we don't have any
Yeah.
answers. We don't have,
So maybe,
It,
because we
the only
didn't-
other thing I want to say quickly
Sure,
on that
no,
note
I'm
is,
fine.
for me, I look at this and I look at our current sheriff. I wouldn't call it. There seems to be, over the last 3 years, I'll use, or 5 years, the sheriff's department, it has less of a presence in the local towns maybe than it did then. And I may be off, but that's my interpretation. Towns utilizing other resources, but it may be, an opportunity for someone like the sheriff's department to pool, come together as a resource and pool out to the towns as a police force. Who knows?
yeah, I mean, there's lots of questions, like should the Vermont State Police even be contracting to provide the general patrol? Personally, I don't think they should. I think that what they should be doing is major highway and major crimes and special investigative units. They should focus on that, and they should be providing resources to towns when they have a major crime. And that's what they do, because even if you have your own police department, the level of investigative skill necessary sometimes isn't there.
Right,
So,
right.
so that's a personal, whether the other committee members think that should happen or not. And I know when Keith Flynn was the commissioner, he felt the same way. I have no idea how Tom Anderson feels. So
I wonder why, I think it's a mistake, if you don't mind my saying so, to be putting out that S27 the way that it's written now, because you're in a fact-finding action investigation of what the bill should be. And when one sees that, it seems like it's a fait accompli that that's what the legislation is. And I'm not sure that that's good for public relations.
well, it might not be, but that was put out in January of 2017. That was there, and then it was during the 2017 session that we decided we were going to do this. There's also, I don't know if it's there this year or not, was about constables. That if you have a constable and you give them law enforcement authority, they're going to be responsible for the select board. Because currently, I don't know if you have constables and if they have law enforcement authority.
Yes to both.
They do have law enforcement
We have-
authority?
One
we have
person
one.
does, yeah.
Yes, he does.
So the constables are answerable to no one except the voters. They don't have an association. The sheriffs are answerable to the voters, but they have an association, and they have to file regular. It's under the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs. It's a regular department of the state. They have to file reports all the time. They have to ask for their budget. They have to, all of that stuff. Constables aren't answerable to anybody. So if you've got a rogue constable out there, you've got a rogue constable. So
What-
we unappoint him. He's appointed by the
Yeah,
select
he's
board.
not voted in by the.
No.
He's not
resident-
voted?
No, he's
No.
appointed by the select board.
But
So-
is he answerable to you? Does he report to you and file?
He files
give you,
reports, yeah.
He does. Okay, in most towns they don't.
Could I?
They're elected. Yeah.
I'm really aware that
Oh
you have like
no
2
no
minutes
no!
left.
Go
You
no
have,
go
like-
ahead. This is more important.
So
to
here's,
answer your
first of all, I
questions.
feel like we are ill-prepared to be able to ask you questions because neither Peter's nor my research was productive. And even when I went to VLCT and I was at the annual town meeting, and at the legislator thing, and I looked for references to this, and there's no reference in their
Right.
legislative actions. So maybe VLCT is doing something, but I didn't see it at the
No, they're
town fair,
not
not the
involved
annual
in
town
this.
meeting.
I mean,
No, but I mean, even when they, you know, when they're advocating for a certain position on, they have like their legislative advocacy positions that the delegates
Right,
vote on.
right.
No mention of that for this coming legislative year. So we haven't done our research. We don't know what the goals of the committee are. And I feel like we kind of need to know where you want to go, or where you envision this process taking you, and what input you're looking for from different communities.
Well,
Ah,
well, we have heard everything from, if we've got volunteer fire departments, why don't we have volunteer police departments? I think we call those vigilantes, but so I'm not sure we want to go there. To let's get rid of all municipal departments and have the state police have one system and have them have outposts. So we've heard everything in between those two. We've heard that we need better training, better retention methods. We should all police should be in the same retirement system. So it isn't just focused on the coverage, but we have heard about the coverage that we talked to one town, for example, that their contract was $12,000 with their sheriff, and that amounts to $10 a person, and it amounts to about 1 hour a week, I think is what we figured. But they expected the state police to come when they called.
as opposed to the sheriff with whom they have a contract.
Well, because they have a contract with the sheriff, so the sheriff isn't going to come. Because the state police are the last resort for towns. They're going to call them, and they're going to come if they can. But should they come?
No, just for clarification, in the situation you were referring to, is that contract, is that for traffic coverage?
Mainly it's traffic coverage, but
Which
they,
is totally different than primary police coverage.
You're right, but you can't provide primary police coverage on an hour.
No.
No, of course
Even
not.
an hour a day. I mean, you
I'm
can't
not
do it.
implying that one
So,
could.
right. So how do we make it more equitable in terms of people who are, what do they expect when you live someplace and you hear somebody breaking in next door, you call, you expect someone to come. If there is a domestic, you expect someone to be there. And how do we do that, and how do we pay for it, and who pays for it? I think that's a huge issue in this state.
But they
And
also
particularly in
have-
a community of a state of 620,000 people, which is smaller than most major, small sized cities in the country. So, over a larger territory, obviously. But so cost effective is one.
Oh yeah, I don't disagree with those points. But just for clarification though, shouldn't we be comparing apples to apples versus apples to oranges in that contracting for, traffic control and contracting for, some form of primary police coverage are two totally different things.
They are totally different, but even if you contracted for primary coverage, how much of that are you getting and how much are you expecting? And if you contract for 4 hours a day, then what happens in the 5th hour?
Right.
Does the sheriff or the state police or whoever you contract with, do they come? Do they bill you for that in addition? How do you justify the fact that
Well,
they're gonna come?
to me, it's not defined. That's the problem. What is contracted, coverage? And not being defined, your only option is you either have 24/7 or you don't. And what is the don't? Then it could be, let's say it's 13 hours that day, and on the 14th hour. So it can't be. I'm not sure it can be necessarily a black and white issue.
I
city
think
to city or
it is complicated, and clearly if you live out in the country, your expectation of time is different than if you live in Brattleboro. Response time.
Response time, yeah.
It's going to be different, but you still do expect somebody to come, and I don't. We, you know, I don't know if you know how we fund the sheriff's offices in Vermont. It's a stupid system, if you don't mind me using that word. We fund them for transport of prisoners.
Right.
That's it. We fund a sheriff's salary and transport of prisoners. That's the only thing they get funded for. So they're expected to go out and contract. So sometimes their contracts are big and they can hire deputies, and then the contracts fall off and they have to lay those deputies off. So they have no consistency. It's not and they have to provide all their own cars, their own dispatch, their own everything. We don't.
The state.
The state
We the
doesn't.
state,
We
yeah.
the state don't
Yeah.
provide any of that. So it's I mean, that's one of the reasons I don't think we should be contracting with that the state police should be contracting, because the state is providing the vehicles and the equipment for the state police, and they do it on overtime. It's all overtime for troopers.
What's overtime for them to come to a town?
call.
Contract out.
To contract out is
Contracted
overtime
time.
for the troopers.
So, I want to let Steve ask a question.
I have just
Oh,
a quick question out of ignorance as a citizen. When it says mandatory police force, it sounds more like you're trying to standardize the police services and set proper expectations for people across the state. So in other words, that everybody has reasonably the same services available to them, however you want to change that or alter that
Yeah.
the way it is now. And then once that's done, to set proper expectations for people. So if the town of Guilford contracts for 1 hour, well, maybe it's not the right expectation that when you hear something next door that somebody's going to respond. And I think that's important for the people of the town to know, because I think there is a misunderstanding of what we as citizens can expect of the police force. And it's not because it's unreasonable expectations, it's just never been very clear.
It has never been clear, and in fact, in 1974, in the study, they talked about how people need to define what it is that they expect from their police departments and what kind of coverage they expect. And I have to say, I wouldn't pay a lot of attention to the way S27 is written, because it was written, to be honest, it was written to get people's attention and to get them to start thinking about what this is. And if you say, well, we're thinking about looking at should we do this or shouldn't we do this? People don't pay any attention until it comes right down to the wire.
Mhm.
And so this was written in a way to grab attention, but it isn't the only focus of this, what's going to be a bill.
Yeah.
So that's why we're going around the state. And we have heard things like, if we had, if you could define kind of what coverage meant, and then you did something like had and I know in Vermont we don't like counties, but if you had some kind of a county tax that's based on some formula, and somebody smarter than me will have to come up with some kind of a formula, but that's based on population, geographic area, and maybe grand list or something, so that some towns don't have a lot of things in them to generate taxes, and some towns do. So some kind of a formula that way, and then you levied a tax on each town, excuse me, and then the sheriff would, I don't know, have little regions. So we're going to have these 3 towns up here are going to have a little outpost, and they're going to have coverage here, and then these, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know, but they, a lot of states do it that way. They do it by county.
So,
It's,
what do you think the next steps are? I mean, what are the next steps, and what should we be looking for, and then how can we, the town of Guilford, contribute to this process?
Well, so far, everything that we've gotten so far, we haven't gotten a lot of written documents so far. But every time we get a written document or anything, it's on our on our committee website. I don't know if you've gone to our committee website.
No. What's the name of the committee again?
Senate Government Operations. If you go to the Vermont Legislature, we have a really nice, easy to use, I think, website. So if you go to vermontlegislature.gov, I think it is.
Yeah.
And then you go to committees and go to Senate Government Operations.
Okay.
And everything on this is there, and there are recordings of all the hearings that we've had so far. And we put everything on there when of course, you can't put verbal on there, but there are recordings. So what we're going to do next is, I should mention that another area of concern here is dispatch and how we dispatch and who pays for it, and the difference between 911 calls and seats and dispatch. They're very different, but we've just confused them in our minds, and so most people think that 911 is actually dispatch, where it's not. But so we're looking at that. I don't know why we
Lots to understand.
I don't know why we did this, the more I think about it. But anyway, so the next step is we're going to be tomorrow in St. Albans and Waterbury, and then that's the end of the kind of going around the state. Then November 7th, we're going to meet for a full day at the State House, our committee, and we're going to, by then, try and have pulled together all the different ideas that have come, and there are tons of them, and they're about different things. They're not just all about. I'm just saw a note here that I had written to myself that one town came to us and said, well, we don't really need any coverage because we've set up neighborhood watches, and they worked with the state police to set up the neighborhood watch and everything. State police said now they get about 7 times as many calls because every time there's a car that they don't recognize, they call the state police. So I'm not sure that's the best solution. But anyway, so on November 7th, we'll have as many ideas as possible pulled together. And our drafting attorney, Betsy Ann Rask, has been with us at each of the meetings. So she's been keeping copious notes and really getting into detail. And then we'll have a committee discussion on where we go now. Are we going to have a bill? What's going to be in the bill? Are we going to talk about the academy and about training and coverage, and what are we going to put into the bill? So if we come up with the bill, then we have to have, all bills have to be, the final drafting request is December 8th for us in the Senate. So we're going to work on it on the 7th and then have a finalized bill of some sort before the middle of December. And then it'll come to the floor of the Senate, and then it'll be assigned to our committee because we're the committee of jurisdiction. So it'll come to our committee, and then that's when we'll start having the conversations and the testimony on the specifics of the bill.
And that's when each community might understand the impact of the bill on its budget and its practices, or the potential impact of.
Well, I think that that there are certain things that I think we have to look at this long range.
Mm-hmm.
So there are certain things that we might be able to say, by the next year we should do this, like if it has to do with training or who's in the retirement system or how that kind of stuff. But in terms of how we get to what I think should happen is that every town should be responsible at some level for their law enforcement. I think that's going to be over a series of years. That isn't going to
hit our next fiscal year.
No,
in a big way.
No, it's not. No, it's not going to. It's not going to. because we have a lot of alternatives that have been suggested, like the sheriff and the state police and or regional policing. Could you contract with Brattleboro? And if you contract with Brattleboro, what does that mean? I mean, there are towns who have been working on this for like 5 years and they can't do it because Guilford doesn't want to contract with Brattleboro because they have no control over what happens. So it has to be more of a partnership rather than a contract. And that takes, so we need to look at all those alternatives, and that's going to take, I think, years. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen next year.
Has there been any correlation with increased crime and the urgency to focus on this bill, from your perspective? You know, has there been more noise? You know, does the curve show that, you know, there increased concern in the smaller towns that?
Well, there are some smaller towns that have said they need more coverage, and then there are some larger towns who say, yeah, but they need to pay for that coverage, and I think that and we all know that the opioid issue is huge, and I don't think that has made us look at this any more than we would have otherwise. The state auditor did a study of how much we pay for public safety in the state, and we pay $574 million as a state for public safety. Now that does include Vermont Emergency Management, but it's what we pay sheriffs, municipal departments, Vermont State Police, that $574 million. Now, maybe that's...
Excuse me, does that include like 911 calls, or that's separate?
No, that's...
I mean, like somebody falls down the stairs or something, that doesn't include...
Well, if... It doesn't include ambulance services and that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay, that's separate.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is what they consider
Crime.
Public safety, which would be under the Department of Public Safety, what they would think up under there. And that's a lot of money. It might be the right amount. I have no idea, or it might be too much or too little.
Dollars, yeah.
We don't know, and
we don't know how it's allocated across the state.
Right, and he did come and testify to us, and he wants to be involved in this whole process. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
I know you have the meeting at 7
Well,
o'clock in Brattleboro,
I know,
but I just
but
want to.
it's
I want
a
to
little
find out
bit
if
looser.
other
7
people
o'clock
have
is.
questions.
Well, we have a precedent which doesn't seem like a match of the whole human service budget that we vote on in town meeting is, you know, that Brattleboro is providing all of those nonprofits are providing something for Guilford, and we provide an allocation for those. I mean, this is different because it would likely be a whole lot more money, but the precedent of an outside source providing something that we're not doing for ourselves.
Yeah, and it's always been
it's
hard
not
to
a new idea.
Yeah, it's always hard to quantify the cost per resident to the service delivered, or the time devoted, or to the fact that we live on, a big chunk of police responses are in 91 and have nothing to do with Guilford residents, and
Right.
Things like that. So I think you're doing an amazing amount of work, and tackling what it springs to mind is the third major project, fourth major, maybe fifth major project in the state. If I'm thinking about Act 46 and solid waste, and the first response, the safety network, and
That's
now
a
looking at
huge
public.
Yeah.
So it seems like looking at how all of these services are delivered to a population of 620,000 people, whether it's cost effective and
But
doing what we need to have done.
We can't consolidate like Act
I
46
know,
and say,
I understand
hey, New
that,
Hampshire, hey, Maine.
But there is more of a trend to be looking at these issues on a macro level, I think.
Yeah, and it's very complicated, and you can't you really can't expect somebody living on, right out here on a back road to have the same response time and coverage as somebody living on Green Street in Brattleboro. I mean, it's and I think most people understand that and know it. But at the same time, we have to figure out somewhat of a better way, both equitability in cost and access. It's one of my committee members is Claire Eyre, who is the chair of Health and Welfare. And she says, law enforcement is like your health insurance policy. You have a great policy until you need it. And then it doesn't work at all. So
what kind of reception are you meeting in these? Is it like a wide range of responses to this idea of
oh yeah,
mandatory police?
yeah, and most towns say, yeah, I get it, I understand, and I know we have to do something, but don't make us do it all at once, and don't make and consider we have nothing in our town to generate taxes. We're just residents. That's
Are
what
you looking at other models in other rural states?
we are. Most of them have counties, and they have county sheriffs that are funded by a county tax. We don't like counties. I have a little devious mind here about how we should do our governance also. Have you read Vermont Papers by Frank Bryan and John McLowry? It's the only thing I've ever agreed with John McLowry on. But anyway,
So something to add to our reading list.
I think it's a great read. It's about how we should maybe look at larger regions, but not so that we can decentralize power from Montpelier, but have it but have larger regions. And he uses watersheds, but for the kind of region instead of, because our town lines,
Cue Steve Lembke.
our town lines don't make any sense.
Yeah.
And our county lines don't make any sense. It was just some guy with a ruler in New York that sat there and drew the lines.
In the
He didn't even know the
1760s.
topography of the. Anyway, I don't want to get off on that, but that's so I would suggest that what you should do is also send me an email with either all of your emails on it or one of your emails. You can do it any way you want, because what we do is our committee staff person keeps an email list so that when this issue is going to come up, she will send it all to the usual suspects. It's going to be a group email that goes to everybody who is interested in this topic and lets you know that on Tuesday we're going to deal with it, and then the next Wednesday we're going to look at it again.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
You may.
This is Ian Keel, BCTV. Is it possible for the public to download those 8 studies that you mentioned?
I can, there's a summary of them on our committee website.
Okay.
And if it's not, I'll make sure it is, but I'm pretty sure it is. And it gives a link to each of the studies themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Except for the 1974 one, which was very carefully typed on a typewriter.
Sure.
So, and it's very long and it hasn't been digitized at all, but all the other studies are there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I mean, it's an enormous task you've undertaken.
I know. Why? It would have been much easier. Next session would have been so much easier if we hadn't done this.
Not
but,
enough other big issues.
But I think I think it is a necessity. It's time.
It's time. You know what I say when we go to these hearings and stuff, and I say, the shelf that houses all those studies is beginning to sag, and we
Problem
can't.
hasn't gotten any better.
It's no, and 2 years ago the House had a bill to require another study, and my committee said no.
Thank you.
We're not going to do another study. We've got all these studies. Let's just read them and summarize them and see.
Act on it.
Well, I mean, we don't need another study.
And the studies have recommendations, I would
The
presume.
studies have recommendations, and as I said, a lot of them haven't been implemented because they're, no matter what you do, somebody's going to get angry at you, you know. And we had one town that said, please make us provide it because we've had it in our budget every year and it gets voted down at town meeting. And I said, why would it get voted down at town meeting every year? Because I thought, well, the cost was too much, they didn't like the sheriff, or they didn't like the state police, or whatever. The only reason that they could come up with was what people said aloud at town meeting, was that they didn't want their kids to end up with records.
Wow.
I know.
That's scary.
So, anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
much.
taking the time.
Thank
I
you
wish
for
I had
everybody.
more
Enlightened us.
answers for you.
So I guess we'll do our research and bring ourselves up to state, and I think Peter just sent you an email with the names of everybody.
Okay, yeah, good.
So,
And do look, the press release that we sent out should be,
it's on your website. I'm
it should
sure.
be
Okay,
on the
we'll
website.
figure it out.
Everything should be there. If you are really bored, you can get copies of there's CDs of all the hearings that have been held up to this point, and put it in your car and listen while you're driving. And
Just one quick question. The announcement in the Reformer, was that a letter to the editor? Or was it an article?
it was, I wrote it, I didn't know if they were gonna use it as a letter or as one of those guest things, you know. I think they used it as a letter.
Yeah, I
but
just
I'm not
found
sure.
it. Yeah, I just found it now, and the keywords I initially was searching for didn't come up, and it came up as a letter to the editor versus as an article in the newspaper.
Okay.
Which is
Well, there was a press release also that went to every newspaper in the, but it may have been drier.
okay.
We will figure it out and
We'll
not
figure it
keep
out,
your,
yes.
you've run your neck. I'm so sorry. This is
No, it's
25 minutes longer than
really,
we.
it's
said
fine.
we'd
I
take.
could have said,
You
I
could
had
have.
to go. I could
Thank
have.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
for joining
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you,
Good
Jeanette.
luck.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. But anyway, if you come up with any great ideas or any thoughts, just,
We are not shy.
yeah,
let you know.
send them, because that's,
Well, they all now also have your email address.
oh yeah, everybody has my email address and my telephone number.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a call, I just have to share this with you. I had a call from a woman who works for a legislator in New York last week about some bill that they were trying to pass that we'd already passed, and she wondered how we got it passed. And she said, well, I think someone from your office called me with some information. And I said, I think that might have been the Secretary of State's office, because we don't have any offices. She said, we don't have any offices? Well, where do you put your people? And I said, we don't have no people. Thank you.
Thank you
Take
so
care.
much.
Thank you.
So to get back to so I think you copious notes, and we all need to do some research and reading, and then I think we'll probably take this up at another meeting. The next item on the regular agenda is to ask if there are any new additions. So I have 3.
Oh,
They will be under updates. You don't have to write them down.
They are
One is-
actually already on the updated agenda.
The third one is delinquent taxes. So annual budget process, emergency operations center orientation, delinquent taxes. Is there something else? No, that's it. So nobody else has anything else. Changes to the agenda order? None.
None.
The next item is approval of the minutes of the meeting of October 11th, which I believe everyone has had a chance to review. So
So we have those.
I would entertain a motion
So moved.
to approve the minutes of the
To-
regular meeting of October 11th.
Mhm.
Richard,
I'll
moved.
second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. In terms of general update for the highway, Dan is not here, and I spoke to him briefly over the weekend, and he basically was hoping to have some news for us today about the work on either side of the Green River Covered Bridge, and I believe he didn't get the information that he needed. Otherwise, and I think he also is about to have one or two candidates for the road crew, but we haven't heard anything about scheduling interviews, and I kind of volunteered us, Gordon, because we're so
Okay.
seasoned at this. And other than that, it's regular fall stuff. Any questions anything else you want to add to that?
Nope, that's pretty much succinctly what I knew of.
Okay.
One of my neighbors had a very interesting comment, just a general comment about training new highway department members and just an appreciation of how complicated all of the machinery is and how difficult a job it is. And he's mentioned this to Dan, you know, just about how long it would really take somebody and how different the job is from when Dan took over and all of those people. So just, you know, offering encouragement and, you know, and I guess for all towns, there's sort of a missing piece in how to train young people to start out doing a job like this.
Thank you, that's nice. I hope Dan watches the
Well,
exciting minutes of the meeting.
he's already talked to Dan.
Under new business, Steve, you are here to talk about floodplain bylaws, and I would invite you to join us at the table since it's such a cozy group this evening.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, so just to bring everybody back up to speed and the focus on the right thing, on November 15th at 6 p.m. Wednesday, November 15th,
right.
over here at the school, we're gonna have a public meeting. And most of that public meeting, if not all of it, will revolve around the River Corridor Protection Bylaw. So what I have here is a slight update to the document that was sent around. It's a little cleaner in its presentation. And I thought we would just go through it just for a second, so, because the main thing is that we're all on the same page, so that you know what's, in my mind at least, what's gonna happen. Any of this is pure suggestions, but I think it's easier to edit than it is to write, so I wrote it and you can edit, okay? So these are the logistics that I suggest that get us up to and through the public meeting on November 15th. The postings, you should know that the Gazette article, I don't know if you had a chance to look at it or not, but I wrote a 500-word maximum article for the Gazette, which will come out on November 1st.
That was in the materials you sent us.
Right.
Yeah.
It's slightly changed, so
This
you
has
wanted,
changed since then?
yeah, what I suggest you do is take this packet of stuff and hang on to it, or I'll send it to you electronically, but this is the finals of it. So this 500-word article basically encapsulates, to a reasonable degree, these 34 pages of the flood and fluvial erosion hazard regulations, all right? It's been reviewed by the Wyndham Regional Commission. They had said they're not 100% in favor of trying to distill it into 500 words, but when they knew that was the object of it, then this is what we got, and they were fine
It was
with
a great job.
Okay, so what I suggest we do is, since this is gonna come out on or around November 1st, when the Gazette gets published, people, you know, at the end of the article, it says, for more information, visit the town website. There you'll find several related documents, including the complete bylaw. These documents will also be posted around town. You can also view the FEMA blah, blah, blah. But since we're committing to this, it would be good that we had all this stuff up on November 1st. And I don't know who I'm looking at that point, but it's probably Peder, right?
Yeah.
So what we have is this article, and I would post it basically just as is, as one document. I would post the entire bylaw, proposed bylaw, okay, so people can look at it and read the bits and pieces. In addition to that, I drafted this thing, which is frequently asked questions about, get past that one. Frequently asked questions about river corridors and protected bylaws. And it pretty much covers everything, what are river corridors?
Eventually, I'll get one.
Okay.
And last but not least, why should communities protect river corridors? right? That's probably an extra.
We
Probably
should
Gabby, we should.
probably not read all of
No,
these
you don't need to,
tonight. And
no.
I'm sorry, did you just suggest making a?
I was
package for
suggesting
Gabby?
making a
Excellent.
file
Okay.
for Gabby,
Thank
yeah,
you.
but I didn't do
I
that.
can give her these
Or we
and
can-
Steve can
Okay.
email me digital copies.
I'll send you all the
Yeah.
digital stuff.
I mean, we've got some of
So,
it emailed,
just-
but
Tell me what you want posted and when you want it
The
out.
Gazette article, the copy of the entire bylaw, and this list of frequently asked questions.
Yeah.
Those are the three things I think would be most important to have up, because the whole point of the frequently asked questions is, FAQs, is to get people's questions answered.
Right.
Or let them come to us in advance if they're particularly concerned about something. All right, so
How are folks gonna know that these are posted? Is that in the?
it says in the Gazette
Yeah.
article,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And it's also gonna say, well, let's keep going on what I suggest happens next. Then, a postcard. I believe a postcard should be sent to approximately 450 owners of property located wholly or partially in the designated river corridor. And I have that list of people who was prepared, that's been prepared by Jeff Nugent at Wyndham Regional. So I can get that to you as well.
Now, one time we talked about including the entire town on that, didn't we? And then your feeling is that through the Gazette and the
No,
posting.
we talked about, we never talked about a postcard to the
Okay.
entire town. We talked about mailing just to the watershed people, the corridor people, and not really going out with a broader thing like the
Okay,
Gazette
fair
article
enough,
and thing
okay.
and everything else.
But you don't think it's necessary, you think that covering the specific people in the watershed and then doing what else we're proposing here covers us?
It would, as
to
far
get
as
the
I'm
word
concerned,
out?
but I'd be happy if.
No, I
Yeah,
think
no.
that's substantial
wanna-
coverage.
I do too.
Since
I
the
don't
Gazette goes to
disagree.
everybody, I think
Yeah.
what will happen here is it's a little like burdocks in your sack.
Right.
If it's important to you, you'll know it's there.
Uh,
And I think people are
Right.
gonna see the article and say, what's this public meeting,
Right.
right?
Good, thank you.
The suggested postcard copy, I think, should be fairly simple. Dear Guilford property owners, the town of Guilford is considering the adoption of a river corridor protection bylaw. And that's what you're doing, right? You're receiving this postcard because our records show that you own property within the designated river corridor. Now, our records is really Wyndham Regional Commission. So are you comfortable with the term "our records show"?
just say records. Take out hour.
Okay. Because records show that,
Yeah.
that's good. For more information on the proposed bylaw, please visit the town website or join us at a public meeting at 6 p.m. Wednesday, November 15th at the Guilford Central School, and it's signed by the Guilford Selectboard.
May I make?
Why don't we say "and"?
That's one of my suggested ads. And join us at a public
Please
meeting.
visit the town website and join us.
Okay?
I mean,
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to
That's fine.
suggest as well.
Both of those are good.
Steve, the other thing I was going to ask you about here is we are considering adopting a river corridor protection bylaw, which in fact replaces the 2007 bylaw.
You asking me to tell me?
I'm thinking that that's true, and that it might be a good way of introducing the fact that we already have a river corridor bylaw.
Yeah, that's in the process of, I'll check with Wyndham Regional to see if if this totally replaces the 2007 bylaw.
Okay,
Because-
you may not, is what
Right,
you're
because
saying.
you see what happens is that the 2007 bylaw is all about
Stays.
special flood hazard areas, right? Which may, like, somebody might have a property in the special flood hazard area and then to some degree not be in the corridor. So there's little nuances like that. I just want
Oh.
to check first to make certain
Okay,
that this would trump anything that goes from 2007.
interesting.
I have a feeling that they're going to stand on their own, 2007
Okay.
and this.
Is the public meeting going to be announced in the Commons and the Brattleboro Reformer? Isn't there, can't we put
Where would you
an
typically
announcement?
do it, Peter, or do you do
I
it?
think I could go under
Yeah.
meetings in both the Commons
Right.
and the,
and we could also post it at Front Porch Forum.
yeah,
And this is always interesting. The pronouns are important. We could always, but I just want to make certain that if you're looking at me to do something.
No,
I
that
think
include-
this
No,
is
no.
clever.
Okay, I just
This
want
is
to be
something
clear
I
when I
would
leave
do.
the table that we didn't do it.
No,
you know?
no, no.
Right.
No, this
We
is something
doesn't
that I
mean
will
you.
do.
Okay.
You've
Mr.
already,
Lembke, do you want to let the camera know the date and time?
Public meeting to discuss the potential of adopting a river corridor bylaw protection. Protection bylaw is November 15th, Wednesday, November 15th, 6 to 7:30 p.m. at the Guilford Central School.
Because it'll be a whole mess.
So now, if we can move to the public meeting sequence, the agenda and discussion points for a second. I broke them down into multiple sections, as you see here. Section 1 is really welcome and introduction, it's 15 minutes. It would be good if we collectively arrived to the best of our ability around 5:30, because I think it's important to greet people and present engage attitudes. You know, so if somebody comes in and says, this is, I think, a great thing you're doing, or somebody comes in and says, I need to talk about this, we at least have an idea, or also to see if people are already reasonably familiar with it, or if they're coming totally new. Food and drink, cookies, cider, water, do you typically ever do that at a public meeting, or not bother with it?
I don't want to say typically. I
Okay.
feel like if we have the pre-town meeting, we have coffee and brownies, right? If we have, that's a really big deal. If we have, what else have we had? Like the Energy Commission hearing, the Planning Commission's hearing on energy, there were no refreshments.
See, the interesting part of this, without even discussing the wind and solid waste management component of it potentially,
Yeah.
is that I have no idea whether there'll be 4 people in this room
Exactly.
or 400 people in this room.
Exactly.
I just don't know.
Right.
You know, because somebody could look at it and say, what's this postcard? I'm gonna go. Most likely there won't be 400, but there could easily be 100 people there.
So I
So
think
it
it's
might
too
be-
hard to do. I
it
think
might-
we
yeah,
just
It's hard to gauge.
We'll
I don't think it's
We'll be
necessary.
bring your own
We'll
snacks.
be stuck with 16 gallons
Yeah.
of cider and not
Right.
having
No,
enough, so we'll just,
I totally agree.
Scratch that.
we'll forget that. Let the record show that I suggested it. Circulate a sign-in sheet and offer copies of the Gazette article. No question about that. We do need a sign-in sheet for people to do. And I think we should pass out copies of the Gazette article, which are easy to photocopy at that, so people can read one thing while they're waiting. And that would be this simple thing here. I think we should have about 15 copies of the complete bylaw, as well as 30 copies of the FAQs. Only because we can't go through the whole bylaw, but somebody may want to make reference to it. I think the rules of procedure should be that we, in the interest of time and the amount of information, we should go through the complete presentation first before we take questions, unless there are points of clarification.
I agree.
Okay with that?
I don't think we should even have them have questions of clarification. I think that people should, that's a suggestion.
Well, what I mean by clarification, if somebody says river corridor, and they say, I don't have any idea what a river corridor is.
Oh, okay,
Right,
right.
it's not like,
okay.
I live next to a river corridor and this
No,
or whatever.
okay,
It's
good.
only for a point of view of, I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay.
I don't know what A&R
I
is.
agree.
Which is agency and natural, so it's that kind of thing, all right? Then a broad introduction of official attendees, and this is the people that I know will be there. Myself, some or all of you. Agency and Natural Resources will have John Broker Campbell there.
Right.
Who some of you have met. Wyndham Regional will be Elisa Sabetto for certain, probably John Bennett as well, maybe even Chris Campany. Planning Commission reps, there'll be some people there from the Planning Commission and some people there from the Conservation Commission.
Right.
I'm not certain. Now, maybe all of these people will outnumber the participants, but I don't know. But each one has a different reason for being there to some degree. Okay? Section 2 is audience ID. I think it's always important to ask some questions of the audience, so you know who's in the audience. So we're gonna ask how many people are corridor property owners, so we know whether, if there's 100 people in the audience and only 4 of them are that means the rest of the people are there because they're interested in the bylaw, and vice versa. Versus there is an official capacity versus those attending out of general interest. Define the corridor property owners as someone who is anywhere from a small portion to all the property in the corridor. I'll be talking, my plan was to be, I would stand up and start this meeting, right? Not somebody from
Great.
A&R or Wyndham
I think
Regional,
you should.
because I
That's
think
awesome.
that once we give up the local thought process and the local caring, we run into a lot of jargon, a lot of, I don't understand what he said. Then we'll ask the property owners, how many are already reasonably familiar with the proposed bylaw, and how many have read stuff, and then we'll know who we're dealing with.
Right.
So that will be either speed it up or slow it down at that point. Review Guilford's current flood-ready status as a unit, so that the town of Guilford has worked to be flood-ready. The 2007 floodplain bylaw currently in place. Probably 90% of the people who are in the room won't know that we already have a bylaw, right? The National Flood Insurance Program membership benefits and requirements, I can buzz through that. Hazard mitigation plan, which is fairly recent and was well done and accepted willingly by everybody. ERAF funding, just to touch on that because that is with the other 5% of the funding that we're looking for. And then the town plan called for a river corridor protection of some type.
Can you talk about the ERAF funding? Are you going to mention what we might have had we had this in place in 2013?
Yes, I'm gonna say that
As a
ERAF is
specific
this,
example.
and one of the points to make is that it's 5%, and if there had, in the Gazette article, it says
It
if there
says
had been $1 million,
Yeah.
if there was
Okay.
$1 million disaster, which is easy to hit, the town of Guilford would be
Yeah.
leaving 50 grand on the table,
Mhm.
right? And by,
Right.
you know, and it's in increments accordingly going up from there.
Yep.
Then reviewing the new bylaw. What is the new river corridor bylaw? Why are we considering its implementation? Define the terms such as river corridor, its components. This is gonna be a thick piece, and people are gonna be chomping on the bit right there. So people could break into Q&A very quickly at that point. And then section 4, Q&A and wrap up, go to questions and answers. I'll mention that there were FAQs listed, and if people want to see those, we'll circulate some copies. Or if they have additional questions, you know, rather than go through them as Sheila suggested, as I suggested going through them, but it's a lot easier just to say, do you have additional questions? Okay. And then we'll see how it goes.
Right.
But
Are you going to manage the questions and answers?
Probably I will. But we're gonna, John Broker Campbell from A&R will have some slides of river corridors.
Mhm.
You know, which will look a lot like these worms gone wild, you know, and things. So he'll be able to, if there are questions, but I don't want to get bogged down in this. If people aren't interested in, here's the floodplain, here's the fringe, here's the corridor, here's the buffer, here's that. I don't want to bore them to tears with it. If they have questions about why do I have to have, you know, a 50-foot buffer, that's what we want to be answering the questions of.
And I think you probably don't want to be in the position of answering questions about individual properties. It seems to me that it would be more productive if people were able to ask you those questions offline instead of taking up the entire communities or the entire
Right, and what I
audience.
want to do is use some examples. So for example, what I would use is I believe, I want to double check the urban legend of this, but there was a sauna on the Green River that during Irene, that as a building was built close to the river, it went into the river, it went down the river, went over the dam and under the Green River Bridge as a unit. It didn't even break up, it went as a building. And what we're talking about.
There wasn't anyone in it, was there?
There's a guy in Greenfield that's still sweating. But the issue that really comes up is this is not what we're doing to somebody, it's what we're doing for everyone.
Are you planning to have, I think it might be a good suggestion, I don't know whether this is going to be a great burden to you, but to have a time that you can announce at this meeting where you would be available at a later date to talk to individual property owners who are going to ask you, for instance, am I in this zone?
I think depending on what we hear, if people say, I went to the agency of natural resources Atlas and I couldn't get into it, or I went to Flood Ready and I couldn't get there may be the reason to have a common training session for people. You know, people who are interested in more information. I know John Broker Campbell would come down. And I think what I'd like to do then is to say, this is the first and last, this is the first of many public meetings, it's your choice. You know, their choice, the select board's choice. Because if there's more information that needs to be done, more training needs to be done, people may have more questions about the 2007 and the National Flood Insurance Program than anything else.
Well, I was thinking of people who have a specific property owner, and there will be some who are going to have specific questions about their specific property. Where are they going to go to get their questions
Right.
answered?
I can give them my number and an email.
Okay.
And also remember, Richard, if you don't already, that 450 people are going to be getting postcards because they are in that area.
Right, but those 450 people, there may be more specific questions.
But the interesting part, Miranda, is that somebody could say, well, I'm going to look, and they could have 3 feet of their property in the river corridor, and the rest of their 75 acres outside.
Right,
or
and
vice
they may
versa.
want to challenge that.
Right. Well, and that's the other thing that I'm going to be very clear on, is that the Agency of Natural Resources has mapped these in 2 ways. Some by field study, not very much, and some by computerized mapping, and that's what they've done. So when about 3 weeks ago, Shannon Pitlick, the Vermont river scientist, came down along with John Broker Campbell and I, and we got in the car and drove up and down Green River and up and down Broad Brook and looked at some of the typical sort of things that we're looking at, so that they're familiar with what we're dealing with down here. And one point in particular, they said, well, this is crazy to have the corridor over here because it's on the other side of the road when there's complete floodplain on the opposite side. So A&R is willing in individual situations to move the corridor, where it obviously butts up against the road. So this is not a railroad. This is a river corridor that we're talking about that has some flex to it.
And that's the key
Right.
piece there. If there is some flex, how do we communicate the flex? And when I look at, your definition here on the Gazette article, thank you. Protecting a river corridor means restricting development that occurs in a corridor. No new primary residence or major additions are allowed within a map corridor without meeting and complying with very specific criteria. Where can someone find the very specific criteria?
In the full bylaw
So-
and from John Broker Campbell at A&R.
So
Right.
when they come to this meeting, they may have
Right.
a thought process.
They're
which
definitely-
I didn't know whether we should.
They're definitely going to have a thought process. And what I work with John Broker Campbell on and others is examples. I'd rather not get into that person's
That's
example.
right, not
Exactly.
at
Say,
the meeting.
broadly speaking, here's what can happen in this situation.
Right.
If you want a garage, you can put a garage in there. It just needs to be shadowed by an upper building and have these flow throughs, so that people don't feel that they're being totally eliminated.
Exactly, but the wording here
Constrained,
concerns
yeah.
me,
Right.
that it does seem like they're very constrained.
They are.
It-
But what happens is that, and there's no way around it. It's
Okay.
like saying to a kid, "It's time to go to bed." You don't say "time to go to bed," okay? Because it's either time to go to bed or
Right.
it isn't. They are going to be constrained by the bylaw, and we'll have a clearer definition of what that means by examples.
Okay.
So that in this
So you'll
situation,
provide examples that
right?
will
We'll provide examples of
allow and knowledge.
typical things
Okay.
that would be allowed and what one would have to do to comply with
Right.
it. But there's no way around.
No,
There's no
I
way to
guess you
say.
gotta say it.
They're not going to be constrained when they are.
Right.
Because of, it'll be a
So,
problem.
I have two things to say, but I want anybody else. So the first thing I want to say is thank you, because yet again, you're doing an amazing amount of work on this, and I
Yes.
understand you just got back from a long trip.
Yeah, but that was fall vacation
That
stuff.
was
True. Well, that's right, so let's
Just
pile it
got
on.
Right,
The
right.
second is that Steve and I had our first conversation today about piggybacking the brief informational session about Wyndham Solid Waste Management District on this. And I just wanted to say that right now, the select board does not have a position on this. We want to share some information
On
and
Wyndham
see
Regional? or
on
this?
Wyndham Regional,
Okay.
on this either.
Right.
You know.
No, you mean
Wyndham Solid
Wyndham
Waste.
Solid Waste, sorry.
Sorry, yeah.
Wyndham
Wait, we
Solid,
haven't updated on Wyndham
WSWMD. So we do want to, Peter and I will be working on a fact sheet, things that we know and things that we don't know, and then we will be asking people if they have questions for us to ask, to explore and to get back to. So this is not going to be a big discussion about where we think the town should go. It's not going to be decided on until town meeting. We just want to start getting input from people who are in town who may or may not be impacted by, who may or may not have an opinion on the Wyndham Solid
And it will
Waste
be the first
membership.
of a number of,
Yeah, a couple.
of a couple
So we
of
just,
meetings.
so I'm hoping it would be like 10 or 15 minutes here.
Just like
Got
Jeanette was 10 to
questions?
15 minutes.
Yeah, right?
Right.
And
Because-
yours is only,
When you take a fairly knotty issue like that, and then
Mhm.
you raise it for the first time, it's not like a review of ideas that came in before, and these are the ones you're going to follow. You're sort of presented. I'm agreeable to do it if you feel that you would like to do it then. But I think the Wyndham Solid Waste Management part should probably, I don't know where it should come, whether it should be first or.
and I mean,
Yeah,
because
but all those, don't you think there's going to be a lot of Wyndham WSMD people who want answers to where they're dumping their trash and stuff? And
people
they
know
just
where they dump their trash. Right now, the question is the cost and what do we do going forward?
But
yeah.
it's an issue that a lot of people, from what I'm finding out, are very interested in.
So we also have an article in the Gazette in the November 1st Gazette on this. So
Okay.
I have no idea.
I mean,
And maybe a show of hands, the way you're
Yeah.
running through this, you
Right.
could just say, how many are you here for this? How many? No, but
Yeah.
seriously, I mean,
Right.
otherwise, we felt that it was important to keep this at the lead
Well,
of it
the one
because
thing
you
do-
had,
but-
you know,
But
put
in
so much
addition,
time and
you have
energy
the
into
planning
this.
commission there, you've got agency and natural resource, I mean, it's not like the people there can't hear, I mean, there are two topics that are good, it's not like childcare and bylaw, you know, so.
And we can also limit
Talk to
the,
David at the end.
the amount of, we can cut it off. That, you know, we don't have to talk about it for a long time because that is not the primary focus of this meeting.
But the question we should decide on is how we're going to present this now dual meeting, because there's nothing in the Gazette article that says this is a dual public meeting or anything else. So you're gonna, the
I
board
don't
is,
think there is, you're right. Can't remember.
Yeah,
No, because that was due before this.
The
I mean,
reason
we
that
just
we
talked
thought
about
of
it in
this
the
was
select
because we were already having a public meeting and this would be another public meeting. But I think I'm a little dubious about putting them together at this point.
Yeah,
I
and
think
that's
we're
the
not gonna
question.
find, well, we can talk, we don't need to take Steve's time.
Right.
Okay,
But,
this can be
okay.
discussed
Yeah.
outside the select board meeting.
Mhm.
it would be good for me to know as soon as you know,
Right.
because I need to tell
Well,
the people, like, the A&R people and Wyndham
Right.
regional people who are coming, you know, that if it's not gonna, if their part of the meeting isn't gonna start until X time, then I would tell them to be there, because I'd like a split. I'd like to say, okay, we're stopping the Wyndham Solid Waste Management
Yes.
District portion of the meeting now. Feel free to, because people will feel trapped, they won't wanna get up and leave
Right.
if we launch right at. So you stop one and say, in 5 minutes, we're gonna start the River Corridor bylaw meeting.
It's going to be
How,
complicated.
what is your personal feeling? When would you want this, you know, what, if you were to structure the meeting,
I
ideally,
told
what is your preference?
Michelle Fossey wanted to piggyback the energy meeting on mine, not mine, but on this one, and I told her I thought it would be better not to. But having looked at the small turnout that they got, I was thinking afterwards, it would have been better if there had been more people there, because I think more people would have participated. I think that because there's two major issues for the town, because it's not a voting meeting, there's no action to be taken.
Right.
We can talk about anything we want to, and if we have to call another public meeting to do one or the other, we would just do that, so.
But we don't wanna sabotage all your work.
No, but
No,
I
no,
think
you're
that's
not
why,
gonna
I think
sit
we should keep this at the forefront,
I think
especially for
so,
the people
too.
coming in with you, that this meeting will transpire from this to this, and then at this time, we will take a 5-minute break, and then
we
we're gonna
set this
talk
meeting a
about the
long time
window.
ago.
Exactly, I couldn't
Yeah.
agree more.
I
So,
agree completely, and I also feel as if the one positive about keeping the two meetings is that we'll have time discipline. I mean, that there's lots more to talk about the proposed river corridor protection bylaws. There's lots more to talk about than can be done there, and that if we have a disciplined conversation there, a break, and then a short disciplined conversation introducing where we are now and what our information is, what we have now to share with them, and invite them to continue this process with us, that we'll get out of there at a decent hour.
So you're saying have floodplain, I mean, river.
Floodplain,
corridor-
yeah,
Six
this
to
is
seven-
first.
I mean, if this is your time frame, 6 to 7:30.
No,
so
I like
think-
this time frame, and then we'll pause, and then we'll have another meeting,
Till 8
let's say,
o'clock or
for half an
something.
hour.
Right.
So you'd be telling the Wyndham Solid Waste folks to come at 7:30?
Well, we
Oh, they're
would,
not gonna
They're not
come.
gonna be there.
There's
It's
no,
only
we're
gonna
not
be
inviting
us.
one.
No, no,
It's
No,
just
no, no,
people-
but people
people
are
are
interested
interested.
in it,
No,
and
I'm just-
we could communicate, because, the Gazette article's already gone, hasn't it?
It
For
has.
the Wyndham Solid
I
Waste.
can't remember if I said a date in there or not, but all I'm saying is whoever's in the room
Oh,
might
you're trying.
have something
Oh,
to
so
say.
you're not gonna announce this as a separate meeting.
No,
You're just literally piggybacking on the faces in the room
yeah,
and say, before you
correct.
leave, here's
What do you
another thing
think?
that we, okay.
yeah.
That's
correct.
entirely different. I thought you were going to formally announce that there will be a meeting about the Wyndham Solid
I
Waste
thought we
Management
were too.
District.
Maybe I missed.
I
So
was
we
under
use
her impression.
No, no, no,
Piggyback
okay.
as a term,
So
to
how
try
would-
to get people there, to take advantage of the people who would be coming, to start
Which
the
is fine.
process. And then we can, and we had said that this is one of one or more
Correct.
meetings that we will have depending on level of interest.
But weren't we gonna put out a communique?
Yeah,
on the
I'm
wind and
sorry, I
solid
don't remember
waste
what I've given to
situation
Michelle, but I'll look and see if
to
I
be
can
done
find
at
it
this
for the-
meeting, and that's why I thought it was, it doesn't matter.
Well, maybe it's
That's
not a
fine.
meeting, it's an announcement.
It's an announcement, there you go. So that's fine.
It shouldn't be a
That's-
meeting.
It really isn't. That's a good point, Richard. So great.
So I'm just.
So
gonna-
you're up front,
I'm gonna stick
6
with.
to 7:30,
6 to
stick to
7:30.
your,
Yes, please do.
you've done such a
But see,
great
that,
job.
that helps because there isn't gonna be any split time, because
Right.
they don't, the
No.
people who are coming to this meeting don't even know
Right.
they're gonna be taught, they're gonna be asked about,
Right.
Wyndham Solid Waste.
We're not going to
We're not
ask
gonna
that,
ask, we're gonna tell them that we're gonna make
Just
some
gonna make
announcement.
some informed
Yeah.
information.
Anyways. I'll
We're
leave that-
sharing information.
I'll leave that up to you.
Steve, thank you. This is really
All 4 people are gonna.
terrific, the time and energy you
Just
put
needs a
into
period at the end,
this.
is that what you're saying? Yeah.
I think people will come. I do.
I hope so. I think you're right.
Okay,
Bert.
what I said in the article, sorry, the Gazette is, it's gonna be at 11, on Wednesday, the 15th of November, at which Steve Lembke will first update residents on the proposed floodplain bylaw, and the select board will then present data on Wyndham Solid Waste Management District options and solicit feedback from residents.
Perfect.
That's that's the very
great.
brief thing that's in
If you're
it.
soliciting
This will be
feedback, it's gonna be
fascinating.
very
We
long.
get 500 people there at 5, you know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Well,
Next.
maybe we can find a way to solicit feedback in the future.
Well, exactly. That's a great, that's a problem.
Greenberg Associates.
No,
Oh, RERP grant.
No.
Oh, no. Okay, sorry.
you moved
Back
it.
way up. I'm way ahead of myself.
You are.
Annual financial
No,
audit.
Flood
appointees.
review board appointees.
The
Can
flood.
you tell that it's been a long meeting already?
So this was just going to be me very briefly. So we already had a recommendation from the Planning Commission, of whom you guys made a motion to appoint. And then now the Conservation Commission has gotten back to me, and they would like to recommend Susan Bonthram. She has shown interest and has volunteered to be on the Flood Hazard Review Board, if you would be willing to appoint her.
Mhm. I think she would be
Steve
great.
has a
I
comment.
don't think that's what it's called. The Flood Hazard Review Board, I think it's the Floodplain Development Review Board.
We have been referring to it as the Flood Hazard Review Board, as opposed to a Development Review Board. We could well be wrong,
So can we change?
but in all of the previous discussions, we've talked
Was
about
correct.
Flood Hazard Review Board.
Among yourselves, not with me.
I think because that's what the state says, if you're gonna do you could do a
Correct.
Flood Hazard Review Board,
If that's in.
if you don't have a
if that's in
design review.
47 or
development
44, if that's the wording, then go with it.
Yeah.
That was the
That is
wording
the
I
wording.
took directly from the state website.
Okay, I'm gonna look again at what Wyndham Regional
Good.
calls
I mean, we can change it if need be, but that's what I took from the state website
Yeah,
when doing all the
I recall.
background. Yeah.
Yep.
it. Okay.
It would seem to convey the intent of the committee more than development, but
No, we're not talking about development at all.
No,
It's
not
flood
at all.
hazard or whatever you just said that I don't even think
Steve,
I.
I can share, email the information to you where I
We
got
need
it
a
from.
motion for Susan Bonthram?
Excuse me, hold on one second. Steve, did you have a resident appointment, an at-large resident
No, I
suggestion?
was gonna see, I know that Susan Bonter wanted to do it from the Conservation Commission, and I hadn't heard anybody from the Planning Commission yet.
We have, Harry Evans.
Harry,
oh, great.
okay.
You guys appointed him already.
We already appointed
Yeah,
Harry.
we
What-
did appoint him at another
Oh,
meeting.
you were not at the meeting.
Oh, no
What
wonder.
I'd like to get is somebody who's very familiar with the town, not necessarily with the watershed, but with the town, and potentially in design or maybe a surveying role or something like that. So I'll come back to
Excuse
you,
me?
Peter, with a choice.
And so
Person at
sorry.
large, okay.
So we have one new appointee to what we are describing as the Flood Hazard Review Board, and I would entertain a motion to appoint
So
Susan
moved.
Bonthram.
I just
as-
had one question. Susan is gone for 2 or 3 months during the winter. Is that going to be an issue?
Yeah, that's already been addressed with the Conservation
Oh,
Commission.
great, okay, terrific.
It's not a concern because of the fact that the likelihood of the Flood Hazard Review Board meeting very frequently is slim to none
Oh,
because,
okay,
it's likely going to be a busy year if they meet once.
okay, Terrific.
Thank you.
London
Okay.
Regional refers to it as the Floodplain Review Board.
Um,
Okay, but you may be correct, so
Well,
let's
we
just leave it.
can, we can
let's leave it-
communicate later.
Let's leave it the way you have it now. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So is there a
did-
second to the
I
motion
will
that
second,
Richard,
yeah.
Veranda's seconding? Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. So backing myself up, the next item on the agenda is the annual financial audit. Peter?
Give me just a brief moment. Brenda, you seconded that one?
Yes.
Okay. An update on the audit. The audit is not fully complete as of yet. But they did do their
Do
fact.
tell.
No, because they, Bonnie from Budget came, she did her initial fact-finding and data gathering. She did an initial analysis, but one of her colleagues in the office does the final analysis to have a separate set of eyes take a look at it. So at the last meeting, or maybe 2 select board meetings ago, we discussed that she had provided us with some information for you guys to review to make sure. She and I have been playing phone tag as Sheila and I had worked out a few minor edits that were needed. But one of the things is that in the materials that she provided for you, that after the data that she collected, there were a few minor journal entries that needed to be made, all of which were done except for 2 of them. And the reason that those 2 were not done is because those 2 explicitly need select board approval to occur. The first of which
Excuse me.
is that we had a budget surplus at the end of the year of $43,140.58. And so what you guys see here are the actual specific actions that will be taken
Move
within
it
our fund
into the
accounting
account.
system to move it into our reserve fund. And so what we need is just for you to have a motion and to approve the moving of it.
Where is it now?
Just,
Right now, it is currently sitting in the general fund, and because it's funds left over from last year, we need to move it
Right.
into.
so you're basically taking it from the general fund and putting it in the reserve fund.
That's correct.
And the reserve fund, if I remember correctly, can be somewhere between 5 and 20% of the combined highway and general fund
That is
expenses of the same tax year. Where does this $43,000 put us in that 5 to 20% range?
So we are already, I don't remember the exact percentage, but we are already above that 20% threshold by approximately $150,000, which we discussed when we were talking about the work for the town office. And so this would be added to that amount that we are already in excess of.
So it would be, we'd be at 165,000.
Well, no, whatever 150 plus the, so
Plus
195.
195, sorry.
That's correct.
Which we might,
Which we need to begin spending down in, according to the auditors, we need to begin spending that down during this fiscal year.
2018,
Correct.
timely.
Isn't it
Excuse
though?
me. Excellent,
So
okay.
we don't explicitly need to spend all of it, but we need to show efforts to
Reduce it.
reduce it.
So that is one of the adjusting journal entries that we need to approve this evening. Are there
Yep.
others?
The second, the second portion of that one is also similar. So every year we budget an amount for the healthcare reimbursement account, and that can be complex because it depends on the health needs of town employees during that fiscal year, and during certain fiscal years, town employees have more health needs than others, and so the amount that is budgeted for that may be in excess or in deficit of what is actually needed. It just so happened that this year it was in excess, and so it needs to be transferred out of that fund and back into the general fund balance. So that's
Got it.
what that number there was.
That's 118,662.85.
That's correct. So
we need-
then the
Is this-
second, so those will actually be two, because those are both surpluses, so those are one form of journal entry, and then that's why they're combined together in one entry. The second entry is entry number 13, which there was a deficit in the highway fund, and so the highway fund is, it's made up of two different funds which are linked together. And so basically we are moving money from the highway surplus fund into the highway general fund. So it's going from 010 into 009. Because there was a
So I'm a
deficit.
little lost here,
I've lost you. on
because
that.
I thought that we had money at the end of fiscal year 2017 that we had not spent because we were using it, and we were gonna move it into the fiscal year 2018 fund
The
for
excavator.
the, for the, no, for
Yes,
the,
because we
the
never
road,
bought it. Right, but
the
there was.
paving.
Oh, for
of,
the paving.
So this was the money that had been set aside as funds. It's technically not a deficit when we look at our overall budget.
Okay,
So we're not at a loss for funds this year. This money was set aside for, by the previous town administrator for the purposes of Act 64, which is the new state legislation around the general roads permit.
So she put it into the surplus.
That is
And we want to
correct.
take it back and put it into operations.
That's correct,
Okay.
because we
Gotcha.
need to use that money to start, thank you for that summary, Richard.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Because we need to start using that money slowly over the next several years to start doing our municipal road survey, so we know where our roads sit in regards to the new standards by the state.
Okay.
So there's those two are two separate journal entries. And then, as I had pointed out previously, that the Green River Covered Bridge Fund had a negative ending balance of $10,376.33, and for the completion of the bridge, and this was a portion of the town's share that had not been fully accounted for in the end. And so, the proposed journal entry is laid out here, which would be to credit it from the capital fund, from the unplanned expenditures line item. And this is the fund from which we will have, this is the fund from which we're purchasing the excavator, but it's also for other highway-related expenses such as this. And after taxes are collected, we will have approximately $150,000 remaining in that account after the excavator has been purchased, which, by the way, has been delayed.
that's right. So that's the capital projects fund? No? Yes, money, so which we now have a balance of $104,000.
That's correct, and we will be, now that taxes have been collected, we will be adding an additional $200,000 for a total of $304 and change. And then
Taking out
Taking out the-
$10,376.
This is,
That's
so the 10,000 is coming from the capital budget back into
The capital
The-
fund.
capital.
it's coming out of the capital fund is what it's called.
Yeah.
And it's going back into the Green River Covered Bridge Project
Right.
Fund.
Okay,
which is
that's a
distinct.
separate line.
That is correct. So all
And
it's
it's the unplanned expense category.
Mhm.
correct.
Are those the three adjusting journal entries
Those
for
are
which
the
we have
three-
and then once these AJEs are approved, we can then get the final,
So
the
then,
audit finalized.
What is AJ?
Adjusting
Just the
journal
journal
entries.
entries.
That's
Okay,
the column on the left there.
okay.
so
No, I got that.
1, 2, 3.
No, they each,
well,
There's
so
12, 13, and 14.
Oh, I see. 12
Yep.
is.
So each
combined.
one of those
I got
goes-
You. No
Yep.
problem. No.
because those are all surpluses, and then
I
the
understand.
second one was
The
a
deficit.
deficit. Well, not technically a deficit. It was a,
can we do this in one motion?
I think that we
You'd have to ask your
could
chair.
entertain a motion to approve the three adjusting journal entry 12, 13, and 14 as advised by Mudgett, Jeanette, and Crow
So moved.
Second.
to complete the actions required to complete the fiscal year 2017 audit.
How eloquent.
Thank you. You seconded?
Yep.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Peter, for all this.
And thank you for walking us through it.
Yes.
Ugh.
That was B
Before we
and C
move
together?
up, yes, actually, yes, that was B and C together.
Check.
Yes, so you got on track there.
Okay.
Just to take 2 seconds to answer your question. So before Mudgett finalizes our audit, which may take another couple months, just because that's what it does. One of the steps was to approve this. The second was for the select board to approve the financial documents that I presented to you previously. So the thing is, I've been playing phone tag with Mudgett to make those edits, and so the question is whether or not if you want to review those documents after the edits have been made, or if you want to just have me sign the documents and move forward once I have completed them with Mudgett.
And what were the edits? I mean, how detailed?
At least in my opinion, they were relatively minor. One was a clarification of the town's relationship with LG's Fire District.
Okay.
One of them
Has to do with personnel policy?
had to do with personnel policy, which you asked me to investigate, and I did. And
Okay.
the way that they have it stated is stated correctly.
Good.
So it agrees with our new personnel policy.
Okay.
And then the third one, I'm blanking out on
We went through the document, Peter and I sat and went through it.
line by
Line,
line.
I know you did. No,
What fun.
So, oh, totally. And so I don't remember, I mean, I think if you could just, if you have the original and you just,
Yeah, it's
Make
over on my
sure
desk,
that-
but I'm not gonna.
I don't want to do it tonight,
No,
but just make sure that if we can be confident that you have checked off that they did that, or there were still remaining questions, or they disagreed with something, and you confirm that with me, then I would say that he and I have done our due diligence and we would be willing for Peter to sign off.
So just to
for us.
clarify, this is not whether or not they agree with it.
They-
This is our document that we provide to them. They just so happen to write it for us.
Mm.
And so it's a matter of whether or not you all agree with it, and they will then take it as you
do.
have.
Right, and do.
So this is not for them to,
Okay, well, but they have, okay, so some of the things that we asked be amended or changed
Yep.
have been done.
Yeah,
We're
maybe
waiting for
I,
You're gonna tick it off.
maybe I could suggest that we send out an email to the select board explaining, here were the clarifications,
Yep.
1, 2, 3.
Yep.
I would like, can we just do an email?
That's fine with me, yeah,
Absolutely.
because I think it's just, it's
To
good to check.
approve the final document to be submitted to Mudgett?
And
Yeah,
then
that's-
Mudgett will do its audit based on that. So in my novice involvement with all of this, I didn't realize that this was the preparation for them then to go over the document.
that's correct.
So now I know.
Thank
Are
you.
you comfortable with that?
Mhm.
Good.
All right, so I don't think we need a motion on that.
No, I do not. But I'm making a note that I will follow up.
Thank you. That would be good. That way we have this included too.
The thing that I wanted to take a second to say is that on October 12th, we got confirmation of the $15,000 emergency response grant, again, which is a reimbursement grant, and that's all. Just got it confirmed.
Is that number 10A?
That is 10A, yes.
10A, okay. I had to look up what RERP meant, but I do know now.
Thank you, sorry.
No, that's okay, not to be sorry.
We do have a lot of acronyms. Greenberg Associates, Peter.
So,
Contract update.
yes, so last week on Thursday, Richard and I met with Chip Greenberg and his associate Brandon, I'm blanking your name. You know,
It was Brendan.
yes, I just don't remember Brendan's last name.
That's okay.
And so this was to after.
Brud,
Oh, and thank you.
and
And
Brud was here,
Brud Sanderson
sitting in the
from
corner.
Stevenson Associates also was present. So this was to begin the initial stages of the document that you guys approved at the last meeting for Chip and Stevens Associates to start the initial processes while the contract is being drafted. So the conversation regarding the contract was relatively brief, at least in my opinion. So it's basically that they are in process of working on it, and just we're eager to get started on the other aspects well.
And we were emphasizing the fact that the select board had agreed that these things could be going on before the contract was signed. That was,
Because it was kind of important to figure those things out.
yeah. So that was one of the points of the conversation.
Yep. The other main point, or not main, but the other big point was that because we will have, due to the way that the month falls, that we will have a 3-week gap between now and the next select board meeting. And Chip did say that he would make sure that he has a draft contract for you to review prior to that meeting.
Oh, good.
So this will be circulated?
Most definitely.
Okay.
So, and he knows the deadline date for materials for select board meetings is the Thursday prior. We made that clear. And so said he would do his best to have that for us. Not explicitly expecting a response at the select board meeting, but at least for you to review and discuss. And then talked about some of the steps. So after our meeting, they being Chip and Brendan, took measurements of the interior of the building, and then one of Brug's colleagues, who's a surveyor, over the weekend, if any residents saw him, was surveying the town property where this sits, and also taking dimensions of the external portion of the building.
So then there was the question of the construction manager, and I don't know whether
Yep.
that is going to be a point of discussion for the select board at some point.
Yeah, so that's actually what I was going to bring up next, and so at least for information for you guys. So, and I unfortunately didn't have time to print something written out for you to read as I explain it. Anyhow, so Chip has received contact from GPI Construction in Brattleboro, as well as Wright Construction of Rutland, expressing interest in potentially being a construction manager for our project. So the
Right? Like the people who did the Green River Covered Bridge?
same exact ones. Yep.
And what's the other one again? I'm sorry.
GPI
and Brattleboro.
in Brattleboro. Both firms had worked with Chip in the past, and they had seen our RFP on the state bid website. And and also on the state bid website, it was announced that Greenberg Associates were the recipients of our bid, or our award. And so they reached out to him. And so the two primary options at this stage where we are at is either to have someone be a construction manager, which what a construction manager does, and I think that Chip did a good job of explaining, Chip and Brett together did a good job of explaining this, is that a construction manager comes in early in the process, basically very soon in the process that we have, once we have a contract with them, and they are able to lend their expertise, because the primary thing, at least Richard, correct if you understood differently, is in the cost and pricing of various aspects of the construction project, because that's what they do. And so with their knowledge of current prices on various items, as well as options for items out there, that they can help us work on the budget development process earlier on in the process. Whereas if you do a general contractor, you develop the plans with the architect and have them all drafted up, and then you put it out to bid to a contractor, and then they come. And if you have any change orders or any other adjustments during the process, it can be more costly. I was under the impression that they felt it was a better option for us to consider a construction manager versus a general contractor. The other big advantage that they stated for a construction manager is that once that firm is hired, then they do all of the RFPs or RFQs for all the subcontractors. So, as you well know, I already have a full-time job, and so the amount of work that I already took to get things to this point would be compounded even further, having to deal with who knows how many subcontractors. And so that's part of their job. They go out, they do the whole bid process for us. So it is, open and transparent. And at that point, though, that process is whomever the lowest bidder is for the subcontractors. So is that kind of how you understood the difference between the two?
And are you done with that?
Yep, absolutely.
As far as the contract discussion and what is, going to be presented to the select board, from a budgeting standpoint, how did that, how we talked about an initial maybe phasing this, how did that come out in conversation?
Yes, so that's going to be part of the contract.
I'm so sorry.
But that's also going to be, that's one of his first points in which he hopes to discuss with the select board as a whole.
Okay.
Is whether or not this needs to be phased. And before we get to that point, though, what he wants to do is to work out between the select board and his firm is what are the priorities for this project, and what are the overall interests. What are things that we would like to see? He put it as kind of a realistic wish list, not gold chandeliers and things like that, but what are things that are realistic that we would like to see but don't know what they're going to cost. And after we have that, working with him, and if you choose to use a construction manager, then we'll be able to have a better idea of, okay, if we have hypothetically $90,000, or we have $150,000, whatever you determine we can spend this year, then he'll be able to say, okay, based off of what is realistic, hypothetically we need to spend $300,000, so maybe we could phase this over 2 years, or maybe we need to reconsider what's realistic, or maybe that fits in with what we have. Does that make sense?
Yep, and he's recommending a construction manager. If we didn't go that route, you're saying that our town administrator would be the one responsible for setting up the general construction with a general contractor?
Unless we wanted to hire Chip to do it,
Right,
that would
I
be an
see.
additional fee on top of what we have contracted, or are in the process of developing a contract with him to do.
And
So-
but he recommends that it would be more cost effective to look at one of these other firms rather than.
Correct.
And what would be our time frame for picking the construction management? I mean, I'm particularly feeling as if I'd like Gabby's involvement in this decision making, since
Well, it's certainly not going to happen tonight.
Oh, no, I wasn't thinking we were
Right.
going to do that. I just didn't know whether this is something that would be on the agenda for the next meeting, or...
Well, I think my understanding, both at the meeting that Rich and I were at with them, as well as conversations with Chip on the phone, is first he wanted to find out which option the select board was interested in pursuing, and based off of that, then we could have a little bit more informal talks with him as to what steps we would, since this is his area of expertise, this is his
Right,
job,
right,
he
right.
advises people
Okay.
on this, then he could provide us with some advice as to what realistic steps we should take,
Okay.
including a time frame for Anda.
Right.
So, the question tonight is construction manager versus general contractor. And then,
And then it's
That's-
more of an informational.
Yeah, it's an information, we don't have to make a
There's
decision.
no decision right
without
now
Chip's
whatsoever.
input.
Because we would have to put out an RFP or an RFQ for a construction manager. They just approached him and said, if this is the direction you're going, we're interested in bidding on this project, because it has to be a fair process. We can't just go out and say we're going to hire.
No, I understand that we would not hire a construction manager tonight. I'm saying that is the question that does the select board want to go in the construction manager direction or the general contractor direction?
That's a question,
That is what
but it's
I
not-
thought is the question
But I
you
don't
were
know if we
presenting
need
to
to
us
answer that
tonight.
tonight.
I don't know why we would not try to answer it tonight. What more information well, I mean, a question that I would have about it is, in addition to your question about the costs, is if we say to Greenberg and Associates, we are inclined to go with construction manager, do they take, as part of their fee,
Right.
do they add on to their fee because they, it's part of,
So,
sorry.
I think I understand what you're getting at, and both Chip and Brud explain that. And so, generally, not always, but generally a construction manager works for a general contracting firm. And generally, the way that they described it is that if you choose and there are independent construction managers as well that work separate from general contractors. But from my understanding from their explanation was that they work for a firm and that the construction management, the manager's services are done for no fee to the town. And that is because it is assumed that in choosing that construction manager, you are choosing their construction firm to do the general contracting.
Right,
And
so
even
that's,
more confused
no,
now.
well, but I think that's why, so the idea was that we need to start thinking about this from a decision standpoint.
That's correct.
Would we go? But Chip wants to sit down and explain this, I'm assuming, to the whole.
That's my understanding, that he wants to know
So-
which side he should
Which-
explain to you.
Exactly, so I don't think we have the information to make a determination.
No, I don't either, that's.
So I think we have to wait until we have that discussion, with Chip on when he comes and presents the question.
Yes.
You agree? Okay,
Yes.
good.
Okay,
Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes,
Mhm.
that makes a lot of sense.
sorry for the crinkles. but-
Okay.
Excuse
So
me.
while she is doing that, I can take the next item since it's going to be me anyways, and that is the Better Back Roads grant. So we have officially received notice from technically V-Trans that we have been given the extension on the project on Sweet Pond Road, and that we also have, as we discussed before, that we should be moving forward as quickly as possible with the work on Stage Road, of which we were hoping to have some more information tonight, but we did not. We have not. We're still waiting to hear from the two contractors. So it is formal. We're just waiting for a signature from the Highway Commissioner.
Great.
That didn't take 5 minutes.
Nope.
I'm not gonna take
I
5 minutes
just
for
wanted
anything
to
else.
make
Catching up.
I'm
Move
tired.
along.
So the annual budget process, I just want to remind people, is about to start. It will start with a memo to the different departments in town asking for figure. Excuse me, I can't talk because of Ian's contribution. It will include, Gabby had asked about progress on the contractor binder notebook, and it will include, as we go through the budget line by line, examining whether we have contracts or implied contracts or stuff like that, and making sure that we get all of our ducks in a row on that.
Great.
And then we will start scheduling work sessions from the middle of November through the beginning of January, depending on what the date, the timeline. We have to look at the timeline for the town meeting. Those work sessions have often been in the morning, but depending on who is free to participate, when we could reschedule them to not start at 7:30. I'm done. Any questions on that?
Well,
On the budget process?
I'm good with that. I think that for at least one commission, the decision about what kind of request to make will depend on other policy decisions that the select board is
So
responsible
we would,
for.
we would work together with that commission
Yeah,
on
okay.
that. And they will be in, each commission, the library, everybody's in, the highway is invited to participate in
Okay,
different work
terrific.
sessions to talk
Okay.
about different chunks of the budget. I wanted to remind the select board, of which I think only Richard is available, on Wednesday evening. We have an emergency operations center orientation with many new emergency volunteers in town. But the elected and appointed officials always have a role in emergencies. And so we had, this is me and my interim emergency management director role. We had invited people from different officials to come, and so I'm grateful that you can be there.
I'm
I
not
know
sure
that
I
you-
can now.
So you would.
I'll try.
I had planned on it, and then
Yeah.
I've got something. that
So when
I
is
can't be
this?
there.
It's you are reading poetry.
Oh, I'm reading poetry.
You're unavailable completely. So
Right.
what if you can make it? You can make it. If you can't, somebody will tell you what to do when we need to have something to do. But it's just a good thing to.
No, I wanted to
Be
be there,
oriented
but
to-
I
yeah.
realized that I had a meeting that wasn't on my calendar that I'm running. So I'll have to see.
Yeah,
what,
you can't really do that. And the final update that I have is, as we were coming into the meeting tonight, Penny handed me a brief printout on delinquent tax situation for the year, which in short, last year at this time, we were $258,000 and change in delinquent taxes. And this year, we are at $193,000 in delinquencies, which means our situation has improved through Penny's efforts and her team by $65,000 this year to date, and it's likely to get better. So she's put a lot of effort into the delinquent tax collections, and it has paid the town well.
Much appreciated.
Congratulations.
Yes. So I'm done with my updates, and Gordon, I think you had looked at the warrants
Yep.
this week?
So I'm proposing that we approve the following payroll expense warrants. Let's see, payroll week ending 10/8/2017 for $4,716.68. For payroll week ending 10/15/2017 for $4,690.77. Expense warrant number 1808 for $19,420.36, and expense warrant number 08FW for $63 for a total of $28,890.81. There were no major individual expenses in those in the expense
what was the
warrants.
19,000?
It was made up of our
All the
monthly
invoices.
expenses
Okay.
for
That's good enough for
invoices
me.
for expenses. So
I
there's
so
nothing
move.
major.
You second
You
that?
seconded.
Gordon's motion?
Yes,
Thank you, sir.
you're welcome.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Did you capture all that?
I believe so.
Okay.
Gordon and Richard,
So,
all were in favor.
In terms of communications, I'm gonna,
I thought you were going to take the first one
the,
and the second one.
the town clerk's office, shared with Peder, who shared with the select board a letter from a resident related to tax collection. And the only thing that I'm gonna say about that is that town officials, the clerk and anybody in the town treasurer, et cetera, they are elected officials. They are not accountable to the select board, and so the town clerk will be taking care of that particular communication. BCA meeting? Oh, Board of Civil
Board of
Authority,
Civil- you
that's
would
me
ask-
again.
I was going to say, you asked me to
I'm
put it
sorry,
on here.
it's been a long day.
It's
It's been a long
We
meeting.
are, so just a reminder that there's a Board of Civil Authority meeting on the 2nd of November, but there is a town-wide vote on November 7th related to Act 46, so people should get their ballots early or go and vote, and hopefully there will be signs out and stuff like that. We have already discussed that there will be some sort of information sharing about our town's membership in the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District at the Floodplain River Corridor Bylaws meeting on the 15th of November. That will start at 6 p.m. at the Guilford Central School. I think I'm done.
I can do the next one.
Thanks.
I will be brief about it.
What does VSP stand
Vermont
for?
Vermont State Police.
Oh, right.
So after a rather long delay due to some internal things, VSP has gotten our monthly activity reports to us. Oh yeah, if you would sign the warrants and payroll. Here, Ryan, if you want to start with payroll.
Oh, sure.
Trying to do it so we didn't interrupt you.
And yeah, so Vermont State Police has kindly compiled all our data for June through September regarding, and they had actually also provided us with some additional information, which the select board had requested a while back, but I'm not going to go into details of it, but this past 3 months, surprisingly, there were very few traffic violations during their
How many hours did they work per month?
8 hours per month.
So this is, those 3 months.
Sorry, not exactly. So June was 5.5 hours, July 7.5, August 7.5, and September 7.5.
So we're paying for more hours than we're getting. So we're paying for 8 hours a month.
That would be something for me to address with Lieutenant French.
And then these other statistics are
Those are unrelated.
records of,
Yes, so the other statistics, the select board had been curious at a meeting a while back regarding the other crime statistics within the town, for which we do not have to pay for because we don't contract them for that. So he provided that with us, and
so these are for 3 months, like there was
yep.
B911 hang up, noise disturbance, suspicious people. So just in June, there were 54 random offenses.
Wow, 54 and
Yeah, in
61.
July, there were 54 random offenses. And in August, there were 61. And in September, there were 43. Kids went back to school. Yeah, wait, pass that around.
I'm a little confused about where to sign this.
The signature page was floating loose on top.
Sorry if I have.
Nope, it's right here.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, I think that's very interesting information, and I'd really like to, take a look at it.
Maybe you can scan it and send it to us, Peter.
I already have it in digital format, so I can send it to you.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me.
These two are done, payroll warrants.
Okay, so
That's exactly what
I
Jeanette's
guess
talking about.
I can bring it back for
Let's put it here. Look.
let's see.
So the next thing is, very briefly, and I'm not even going to go into any detail, is that we were notified that a new wastewater system is been approved on Sugar House Hill Road. And last but not least for communications, and then we're done, is
Like a septic system?
yeah. We get notified every time, and we just make a public announcement of it.
Is someone building, or is?
Nope,
is
it's
that
a new,
just the
it's a new system
current
for,
house?
at least what the
current.
permit said is that it was an existing camp, which is being converted into a full-time residence. And
Okay.
one of those things that was needed, it was a well and septic
Thank
system. Last but not least is we received, we were asked to notify the town about the Neighbors for Neighbors Taking Action community meeting on October 29th from 3 till 5 p.m. And this will occur at the Grange on Guilford Center Road.
Do we have any
To
idea
discuss
what that meeting is about?
Yes, it's the I know what it's about.
Excellent.
Well, you've got it right there.
Yeah.
It's the Democrat, the Wyndham County Democrat.
Well, that
the
will
Guilford
follow this
Democrats.
meeting.
Yeah.
So the initial meeting is for people of any political persuasion to meet and discuss issues concerning the community as a whole and what can be done about them. And then shortly after that, will be followed by the Guilford Democratic Committee to discuss what is being done locally on these issues and how to take action.
And a lot of this grew out of an earlier meeting that they had in the
Right.
in October,
I think.
or maybe late September.
I think it was September.
And there, a lot of topics came up, and so they just decided to hold another meeting to engage the large, it originated as a Democratic,
29.
local Democratic committee.
Okay.
And then so many issues came up that they decided to have a conversation with more people, and to invite more people into the conversation. So that is at October 29th from 3 to 5 at the Grange.
I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
You do. Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Yeah, yes, I shall definitely
second
do
that?
that, yes.
Is there any discussion?
8:30 p.m.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Oh,
you.
sorry,
So
sorry.
moved.
Anybody? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.